Last weekend, I started clearing out my childhood room, not expecting what I'd find. The afternoon light was slanting through the dusty blinds when my hand brushed against something loose behind the closet shelf. I'd been packing up boxes all day, sorting through old yearbooks and forgotten clothes, when the back panel gave way slightly under my touch. My heart started racing even before I knew why. I pulled the panel free and stared into the dark space behind it. Bottles, 3 of them pushed far back into the wall cavity. Vodka bottles, empty, their labels faded from years of hiding. My hands were shaking as I reached for them, and that's when I saw the letters. Folded papers tucked beside the bottles, yellowed at the edges. I sat down hard on the floor, my back against the closet door, and opened the first letter. It was in my mother's handwriting, dated 7 years ago. "I can't let anyone know," it read. The church would never understand. Daniel would never understand. I just need to get through this week, and then I'll stop. I promise myself I'll stop. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. 7 years. 7 years of hiding, of smiling at church potlucks, of leading Bible studies while bottles were stashed in the walls of our home. I opened another letter, then another, each one the same. Promises to quit, fear of discovery, desperate prayers mixed with justifications. "Why?" I whispered to the empty room. "Why didn't you tell me?" But I already knew the answer. Our family's reputation at church was everything. We were the ones people pointed to as examples. My mother taught women's ministry. I led youth group. We smiled in every church directory photo, our lives apparently blessed and whole. I thought about all those Sunday mornings, sitting in the third pew from the front, singing hymns while this secret festered in the walls of our home. How many times had I sensed something was wrong, but pushed the feeling away? How many times had my mother's eyes looked distant and sad, and I'd told myself I was imagining things? That evening, I sat alone in our living room, scrolling through old Facebook posts. There we were at the church picnic last summer, arms around each other, bright smiles. "Blessed beyond measure," the caption read, with a string of prayer hands emoji. 200 likes. 50 comments about what a wonderful family we were. I kept scrolling. Easter service. 2 years ago, Mom and I in matching pastel colors, holding our Bibles. "He is risen," the post declared. I remembered that morning now, how she'd been in the bathroom for 20 minutes before we left, how her hands had trembled slightly when she held her coffee cup in the car. Christmas program. There was Emma in her angel costume, me helping with the tech booth, Mom serving cookies at the reception afterward. The comments gushed about our servant hearts. Mission trip send-off. Mom had baked 3 dozen cookies for the youth group. In the photo, she was laughing, surrounded by teenagers. I zoomed in on her eyes. Even in that tiny thumbnail image, I could see it now. That distant, haunted look I'd trained myself to ignore. Every photo perfect, every caption praising God, and behind every single one of those smiles, bottles hidden in walls, letters full of shame and fear, tucked away where no one would ever find them. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "How's the packing going?" I stared at the message for a long time. What could I possibly say? That I'd just discovered our entire family life had been a performance? That our faith, the thing we'd built our identity on, might have been nothing more than a carefully maintained image? I turned off my phone without responding. The truth was crushing me, but the weight of what would happen if I told anyone felt even heavier. Our pastor's voice echoed in my memory from a sermon last month. "We must be careful not to cause scandal in the body of Christ. Some things are better handled quietly in the family." Was this what he meant? Was I supposed to pretend I hadn't found anything? Pack up these bottles and letters, throw them away, and go on smiling in the third pew? I couldn't do it, but I also couldn't imagine what would happen if I didn't. 1 month earlier, a typical Sunday service went by like many others. I sat in my usual spot, watching Pastor Michael pace across the platform with his Bible open. "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice," he read from Ephesians chapter 4. "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 through 32. The words washed over me like they always did, familiar, comfortable, unchallenging. I'd heard sermons on forgiveness my entire life. I could probably preach one myself at this point. "Church family," Pastor Michael continued, his voice taking on that earnest tone he used for important points, "unity is precious. When conflicts arise, when someone offends us or hurts us, we must remember that our witness to the world depends on how we love each other. Sometimes that means letting things go. Sometimes that means forgiving quietly and moving on, rather than making a public issue that could damage the body of Christ." I noticed several people nodding. Mrs. Henderson in the row ahead dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My mother, sitting beside me, had her head bowed, hands folded in her lap. After the service, I lingered in the fellowship hall, drinking weak coffee from a styrofoam cup. Groups of people clustered around the snack table, laughing and catching up. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. "Daniel." Pastor Michael appeared at my elbow, his hand landing on my shoulder. "Good to see you, son. How are things?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Good sermon today. Thank you." You know, I think that message about unity and forgiveness is especially important right now. He lowered his voice slightly. "There's been some tension in the congregation lately. People wanting to air grievances publicly rather than handling things biblically. We have to protect the church's reputation in this community." I nodded, feeling something twist in my stomach. Was faith really just about keeping up appearances? About making sure nothing messy ever showed? "I'm glad you understand," Pastor Michael said, squeezing my shoulder before moving on to greet someone else. I threw away my coffee cup and headed for the parking lot, feeling more alone than I had in a long time. A week later, I sat at our dining room table with my mother and younger sister Emma, picking at the casserole Mom had made. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the scrape of forks against plates. "This is good, Mom," Emma said, her voice too bright. "Really good." "Thank you, sweetie." My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. I took a breath. "Mom," I was thinking, "maybe it would be good for you to talk to someone, like a counselor or something." The room went very still. A counselor? My mother set down her fork carefully. "Why would I need a counselor? I just think." I struggled to find words that wouldn't make this worse. Sometimes it helps to have someone to talk to about stress or anything that might be difficult. "Daniel, I'm fine." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I appreciate your concern, but I have my Bible study group. I have prayer. I have everything I need." "But what if, honey?" She reached across the table and patted my hand. "You worry too much. Everything is fine. We're blessed. Look at this beautiful dinner, our family together. God is good." Emma was staring down at her plate, her shoulders tense. She knew something was wrong too. We all knew, but admitting it would mean cracking the perfect facade we'd spent years building. I pulled my hand back. "Right, sorry, never mind." The rest of the meal passed in that same heavy silence, all of us pretending everything was fine, all of us knowing it wasn't. A few days later, I found myself sitting in Pastor Michael's office, the afternoon sun streaming through the window behind his desk. I hadn't planned to come here, but somehow my car had ended up in the church parking lot and my feet had carried me inside. "Daniel?" Pastor Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "What's on your mind?" "I need advice," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "About family stuff, personal stuff. Of course, you know anything you share here is confidential." I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. If someone in your family was struggling with something that could be damaging if people found out, what would be the right way to handle it? Biblically, I mean. Pastor Michael's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. That depends on the situation. But generally speaking, Daniel, I believe in handling family matters within the family. The world doesn't need to know everything. Sometimes love means protecting people's dignity and reputation. Even if they need help, help can be sought quietly, discreetly. He leaned forward. Look, I've been in ministry for 25 years. I've seen what happens when families air their problems publicly. It destroys them. It destroys their witness. And for what? A moment of honesty that leaves everyone worse off than before? But isn't truth important? The words came out more forcefully than I'd intended. Truth is important, Pastor Michael said slowly, but so is wisdom. So is protecting the church from scandal. So is honoring your father and mother. He paused. Whatever is going on, Daniel, I strongly encourage you to handle it privately. Pray about it. Forgive if you need to forgive. But don't do anything that could hurt your family or this church. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly. He was telling me to be quiet, to keep the secret, to maintain the image. Yes, sir, I said. I understand. Good. He smiled, the warmth returning to his voice. You're a good young man, Daniel. Your family is blessed to have you. Don't let the enemy use this, whatever it is, to create division. I left his office feeling more trapped than when I'd entered. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my Bible open on my chest. I'd been trying to read for an hour, but the words kept blurring together. Finally, I let the book fall open to wherever it wanted. Psalm 34. My eyes caught on verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm chapter 34, verse 18. I read it again and again. Close to the brokenhearted. Was my heart broken? It felt more like it was being slowly compressed, squeezed tighter and tighter until I could barely breathe, crushed in spirit. Yes, that was exactly how I felt. Crushed under the weight of secrets and lies and the pressure to keep smiling, keep pretending, keep protecting the image we'd built. Are you really close? I whispered into the darkness. Are you really here? No answer came, just the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on the street outside. But something in those words, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted," felt different than everything I'd heard at church. Pastor Michael talked about unity and reputation and keeping up appearances. This verse talked about God drawing near to people who were falling apart. Maybe those were two different things. Maybe the faith I'd grown up with, the one that valued image over truth, peace over honesty, wasn't the same as the faith described in this ancient psalm. I closed my eyes, the Bible still resting on my chest, and felt the first tiny crack form in the wall I'd built around my doubts. God was close to the brokenhearted, the verse said. I was brokenhearted. Maybe that meant he was close to me, even if no one else was. Even if admitting my brokenness would cost me everything I'd built my life on. The thought was terrifying and comforting in equal measure, and I lay there in the dark, holding on to it like a lifeline, wondering what came next. Part 2. Breaking Point. 2 weeks later, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I found more evidence I wish I'd never seen. The attic was stifling, dust motes swirling in the shaft of light from the single bulb overhead. I'd been putting off coming up here, but Mom had asked me to look for old tax documents. Instead, I found 3 more bottles wedged behind a box of Christmas decorations and a manila envelope stuffed with letters dating back almost a decade. My hands trembled as I read them. Letter after letter, all the same pattern promises. To stop, justifications, prayers for strength that were never answered because the help was never sought. Some were addressed to God. Some were addressed to my father, who died when I was 12. "I'm sorry," one read. "I'm so sorry you're not here to help me through this. I don't know how to stop." I sat on the dusty floorboards, my back against a support beam, and felt something inside me crack wide open. 10 years, maybe longer. How much of my childhood had been a lie? How many times had I thought my mother was just tired, just stressed, just having a hard day, when the truth was hidden in walls and attics and locked bathroom cabinets? The anger came suddenly, hot and sharp in my chest. She'd let me grow up thinking everything was fine. She'd let me stand in front of youth groups and talk about God's faithfulness in our family. She'd smiled and nodded while I'd defended our perfect Christian home to friends who'd questioned whether faith was real, all of it built on a foundation of bottles and lies. I stuffed the letters back in the envelope and climbed down from the attic, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. That evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Mom was in the living room, folding laundry and watching a cooking show. The normalcy of it, the domestic peace of the scene, made my anger flare even hotter. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. She looked up, and something in my face made her smile fade. "Daniel, what's wrong?" I found more bottles in the attic and more letters. I pulled the envelope from behind my back. 10 years, Mom. At least 10 years. The color drained from her face. She set down the shirt she'd been folding, her hands moving slowly, carefully. "You had no right to go through my private things? Your private things?" My voice rose. "They were hidden in our house. The house I grew up in. The house where you taught Bible studies and hosted prayer groups while you were—" "Don't!" Her voice was sharp now, defensive. "Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what I've been through." "Then tell me, help me understand, because right now, all I see is years of lying, years of pretending, years of making me think I was crazy for sensing something was wrong." She stood up, her face flushing. "I protected you. I protected this family. Do you know what would happen if people found out? Everything we built, everything your father worked for. Dad's been dead for 10 years. The words came out louder than I intended. "And you've been using his memory as an excuse to keep drinking and lying about it." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. The sharp crack echoed in the quiet room, and we both froze, staring at each other. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out of my house." I touched my cheek, feeling the sting, feeling something deeper break inside me. "Mom," I said, "get out." I left. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, my face burning, my hands shaking, and drove aimlessly for an hour before I could even think clearly enough to figure out where to go. 1 week later, at a church small group meeting, I sat in a circle of folding chairs in the fellowship hall, wondering why I'd even come. The topic was forgiveness and reconciliation. Of course it was. Tom, our small group leader, opened his Bible to Matthew chapter 18. "Jesus gives us a clear pattern here," he said. "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church." Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17. "That seems harsh," someone said. "Taking it to the whole church?" "It's about restoration," Tom replied. "The goal is always reconciliation, always bringing the person back. But it requires honesty. It requires confronting the sin, not ignoring it." I felt several people glance at me. Did they know? Had word gotten around about my fight with Mom? "But we have to be careful," Mrs. Patterson added quickly. She was one of Pastor Michael's closest allies, always defending the church's reputation. "We can't just go around airing everyone's dirty laundry." Some things are better handled quietly in the family. Is that what Jesus said? The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. Everyone turned to look at me. I continued, my heart pounding. Jesus said to confront sin. He said, if the person won't listen privately, bring witnesses. If they still won't listen, tell the church. That doesn't sound like handle it quietly and pretend everything's fine. Mrs. Patterson's lips pressed into a thin line. We have to protect people's dignity, Daniel, and the church's witness to the community. What about protecting people from harm? I asked. What about truth? Tom held up a hand. These are good questions, important questions. The balance between truth and grace is. I don't think it's about balance, I interrupted. I was shaking now, but I couldn't stop. I think we've been using graces as an excuse to ignore sin. We've been using unities as an excuse to silence people who are hurting. The room went very quiet. Daniel, Mrs. Patterson said carefully, are you talking about something specific? I opened my mouth, then closed it. Was I ready to tell them? Was I ready to blow up my family's reputation, my mother's standing in the church, everything we'd built? No, I said finally, just thinking out loud. But I saw a few faces in the circle. Tom, Sarah, Mike, looking at me with something like understanding, like they knew I was wrestling with something real, something that mattered. After the meeting, Tom pulled me aside. If you need to talk, my door's always open. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The next day, Pastor Michael called me into his office again. Daniel. He didn't invite me to sit this time. I heard about the small group discussion last night. I was just asking questions. You were causing division. His voice was firm, the warmth from our previous conversation completely gone. Mrs. Patterson was very upset. She said you were implying that the church leadership is covering up sin. I didn't say that. You implied it. And Daniel, I'm going to be very direct with you. He leaned forward, his hands flat on his desk. I know you're going through something with your mother. I know there's tension there. But you cannot use this church as a platform to work out your family issues. That's not what I've been patient with you, he continued, talking over me. I've tried to guide you gently. But if you continue down this path, if you continue stirring up trouble and questioning the leadership of this church, there will be consequences. Do you understand? The threat hung in the air between us. What kind of consequences? I asked quietly. The kind that affect your standing in this community, your reputation, your future ministry opportunities. He straightened. I'm not trying to be harsh, Daniel. I'm trying to protect you. But you need to make a choice. You can submit to godly authority and handle your family situation privately with humility and forgiveness. Or you can continue on this path of bitterness and rebellion and face the consequences. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time. This wasn't about protecting me. This wasn't about godly authority. This was about control, about maintaining the image, about silencing anyone who threatened the comfortable facade we'd all agreed to maintain. I understand, I said. Good. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad we had this talk. I left his office feeling like I'd just been given an ultimatum, conform or be cast out. That night, I knelt beside my bed, my Bible open in front of me, and tried to pray. I'd turned to Romans chapter 8, a passage I'd memorized as a kid. My eyes found verses 15 through 17. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father! The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ. Romans chapter 8, verses 15 through 17. A spirit of adoption, children of God, not slaves to fear. But I felt like a slave to my family's expectations, to the church's demands, to the crushing weight of keeping secrets and maintaining appearances. God, I whispered into the darkness, I don't know what to do. Everyone's telling me to be quiet, to forgive and forget, to protect the family and the church. But it feels wrong. It feels like I'm enabling something destructive by staying silent. No audible answer came, but as I read the passage again, something shifted inside me, the spirit of adoption. I was God's child, not because I performed well or kept up appearances or protected the church's reputation. I was his child because he'd chosen me, adopted me, made me his own. That identity didn't depend on my mother's approval. It didn't depend on Pastor Michael's blessing. It didn't depend on the church's acceptance. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of something that might have been hope, or maybe courage, or maybe just the faintest whisper of freedom. But the weight of everything, the conflict with Mom, the pressure from the church, the isolation, the fear of what would happen if I kept pushing for truth, it was all still crushing down on me. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But something was beginning to change. 2 days later, I sat on a park bench near the church, my hands shaking, my chest tight, unable to catch my breath. Panic attack. I'd had them before, years ago, but never like this. The world felt like it was closing in, the air too thick to breathe, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I'd been walking, trying to clear my head, when it hit me all at once. The weight of the last month, the fights, the secrets, the threats, the crushing loneliness of trying to do the right thing while everyone told me I was wrong. I can't do this, I gasped to no one. I can't keep going like this. A woman walking her dog stopped, concerned. Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone? I shook my head, unable to speak. She hesitated, then sat down on the other end of the bench, giving me space but staying close. She didn't say anything. She just sat there while I struggled to breathe, while tears streamed down my face, while everything I'd been holding together fell apart. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, my breathing slowed. The panic receded, leaving me exhausted and hollow. "Thank you," I managed. She smiled gently. "Been there. It's awful." "But you made it through." After she left, I sat there in the fading afternoon light, completely spent. I thought about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood, begging God to take the cup from him. I thought about how even Jesus had felt overwhelmed, crushed by what was coming, but he'd gone through with it anyway. He'd chosen the hard path, the painful path, the path that led through death to resurrection. I didn't know if I had that kind of courage. But sitting there on that bench, broken and exhausted and alone, I felt something I hadn't felt before. A strange, quiet certainty that I couldn't keep living the way I'd been living. Something had to change, even if it cost me everything. TE Part 3. Grace and Truth, revised. The following weekend, while packing up old books in the study, I found something that changed everything. I was pulling volumes off the shelf, dusty theology books, old devotionals, commentaries my father had collected, when the family Bible slipped and fell open on the floor. Papers scattered across the hardwood, and I knelt to gather them up. They were notes, dozens of them written in my mother's handwriting, tucked throughout the pages of Scripture. I picked up the first one, dated 3 years ago, pressed between the pages of Psalm 51. "God, I am so tired of hiding," it read. "I am so tired of pretending. I want to be free, but I don't know how. I'm afraid of what people will think. I'm afraid of losing everything. Please help me." Another from 2 years ago, tucked into the book of John. "I read today that the truth will set me free, but the truth feels like it will destroy me. How do I choose freedom when it costs so much?" And another, more recent, folded into Romans chapter 8. "I see Daniel pulling away. I see the hurt in his eyes. I know he senses something is wrong, but I can't bring myself to tell him. I'm so ashamed. God, I'm so ashamed." I sat on the floor, surrounded by these fragments of my mother's hidden pain, and felt my anger begin to crack and soften. She wasn't just the person who'd lied to me. She was someone who'd been trapped, afraid, desperately wanting to change but not knowing how. She was broken, too. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom, the small group leader.
Been thinking about our conversation.
Want to grab coffee? I stared at the message, then at the notes scattered around me, then back at my phone. Maybe I didn't have to do this alone. That evening, I sat across from Tom at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop. He'd listened without interrupting as I told him everything. The bottles, the letters, the confrontation, the pressure from Pastor Michael to stay silent. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee slowly. "I'm going to be honest with you, Daniel," he said finally. "This is complicated. Your mother needs help, real help. But the way you've been going about this, confronting her in anger, fighting with the pastor, it's not going to lead anywhere good. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend everything's fine? No." He leaned forward. "But there's a difference between truth without grace and grace without truth. You've been swinging toward truth without grace, exposing the problem, demanding change, but without compassion for how hard this is for her. She slapped me, Tom. She threw me out of the house. I know, and that was wrong, but hurt people hurt people." He paused. "What if, instead of demanding she admit everything publicly, you invited her into a conversation about getting help? What if you brought someone she trusts, maybe an elder, maybe a counselor, to help mediate?" I thought about the notes I'd found, the years of shame and fear, the desperate prayers for freedom. "She's scared," I said quietly. "She's been scared for years." Then maybe what she needs isn't condemnation. Maybe she needs someone to say, "I see you're hurting. I see you're trapped. Let me help you find a way out." I ran my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the last month pressing down on me. "What about Pastor Michael? He made it pretty clear that if I keep pushing this, there will be consequences." Tom's expression hardened slightly. "Pastor Michael is wrong. And between you and me, he's been wrong about a lot of things for a long time. But that's not your battle to fight right now. Your battle is helping your mother find healing. Everything else is secondary." "What if she won't accept help?" "Then you set boundaries. You love her, but you don't enable her. You make it clear that you can't pretend everything is fine, but you're willing to walk with her toward healing if she's willing to take that step." He met my eyes. "That's what grace with truth looks like. It's honest about the problem, but it offers a way forward." For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but hope. A small, fragile hope that maybe there was a path through this that didn't end in complete destruction. Later that night, I sat on my bed with my Bible open, reading through Ephesians chapter 4 again. The same passage Pastor Michael had preached on, but I was seeing it differently now. "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 through 32. Before, I'd heard this as, "Be quiet and pretend everything is fine." But that wasn't what it said. It said to put away bitterness, not truth. It said to be kind and tender-hearted, not to enable harm. It said to forgive. But forgiveness didn't mean pretending the harm never happened. I thought about how Jesus had forgiven. He'd confronted sin directly. He'd called out the Pharisees for their hypocrisy. He'd overturned tables in the temple, but he'd also wept over Jerusalem. He'd shown compassion to the woman caught in adultery while still telling her to go and sin no more. He'd offered grace and truth together, not one without the other. Maybe that's what I needed to do. Not attack my mother, but not enable her either. Set boundaries while offering love. Speak truth while extending grace. It would cost me. It might cost me my standing in the church. It might cost me relationships. But living in denial and bitterness was costing me something too. My integrity, my peace, my relationship with God. I closed my eyes and prayed. Not the desperate, angry prayers of the last few weeks, but something quieter, more honest. God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to love her and protect myself at the same time. I don't know how to speak truth without destroying everything. But I'm asking you to show me. Give me wisdom. Give me courage. Help me trust that you're close to the brokenhearted, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. In the silence that followed, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not certainty about how things would turn out, but certainty that I didn't have to figure it all out on my own. The next day, I called Tom and asked him to help me set up a meeting with my mother. He agreed, and we arranged to meet at his house. Neutral ground, with someone present who could help keep the conversation from spiraling into another fight. When I arrived, Mom was already there, sitting stiffly on Tom's couch. She looked tired, older than I remembered.
Thank you for coming,
I said, sitting across from her. She nodded but didn't speak. Tom sat in a chair between us. I want to start by saying that we're all here because we care about each other and want to find a way forward. This isn't about blame or shame. It's about honesty and healing. I took a breath. Mom, I found your notes. The ones you'd hidden in the family Bible. Her face went pale. You had no right. I know you're scared, I continued, my voice shaking slightly. I know you've been carrying this alone for years, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I confronted you in anger instead of compassion. Tears welled in her eyes. But I can't pretend anymore, I said. I can't go back to acting like everything is fine when it's not. You need help, real help, and I want to support you in getting it, but I can't enable the hiding anymore. She was crying now, her hands covering her face. Everyone will know. The church will know. I'll lose everything. You're losing yourself, I said gently. You've been losing yourself for years, and maybe losing the image is what it takes to find yourself again. Tom leaned forward. Mrs. Anderson, I've already spoken to a counselor who specializes in addiction. She's discreet, she's compassionate, and she understands the unique pressures of being in church leadership. Would you be willing to meet with her? Just once to see if it might help? Mom looked between us, her face crumpling. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of hiding. Then, stop, I said. Let us help you stop. She nodded, still crying, and for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that looked like relief. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't instant healing. It was just the first small step toward honesty, toward freedom, toward the truth that Jesus promised would set us free. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, a family dinner looks different now. Mom and I sit at the kitchen table with Emma, eating spaghetti and talking about Mom's counseling sessions. She's been sober for 2 months. It's fragile, it's hard, but it's real. I told my counselor about the notes you found, Mom says, twirling pasta on her fork. She said it was actually a good thing. That I'd been crying out for help even if I didn't know how to ask for it directly. How are you feeling about the church situation? Emma asks carefully. Mom sighs. Pastor Michael asked me to step down from women's ministry. He said it was for the best, while I focus on recovery. Part of me is relieved. Part of me is angry that he's treating it like I'm contagious. You're not contagious, I say. You're human, and you're getting help. She reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. Thank you for not giving up on me, for not letting me give up on myself. The conversation isn't perfect. There are still awkward moments, still things we're learning to navigate. But there's honesty now. There's space to be broken without pretending we're not. This morning, I woke before dawn and knelt beside my bed in the gray light filtering through the blinds. My Bible lay open on the comforter, the pages soft and worn from use. I read Romans chapter 8 again, whispering the words into the quiet room. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. Romans chapter 8, verses 15 through 17. I closed my eyes, my hands folded on top of the open Bible, and let the truth of those words sink deeper. Abba, I whispered, Father. Not the distant, demanding God I'd imagined, the one who required perfect performance and flawless reputation, but a Father who adopted me, who called me His child, not because I had it all together, but because He chose me. The morning was still. No audible voice answered. But I felt something shift inside me, a quiet certainty that I belonged to Him, that my identity didn't depend on my mother's recovery or the church's approval or my ability to hide my brokenness. I was His child. That was enough. I opened my eyes and looked out the window at the lightening sky, feeling more at peace than I had in months. The journey wasn't over. There would be hard days ahead, but I wasn't walking it alone, and I wasn't walking it as a slave to fear anymore. I was walking it as a son, as someone beloved, as someone free. Last Sunday, I sat in a different church, a smaller congregation where Tom invited me. The worship was simpler, the building older, but something about it felt more alive than anything I'd experienced at my old church. During the service, they read Psalm 34 together, the whole congregation speaking the words in unison. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm chapter 34, verse 18. I felt tears sting my eyes. These were the words that had first given me hope, back when everything was falling apart. And here, surrounded by people I barely knew, I felt them sink even deeper. After the service, a small group gathered in the fellowship hall. We sat in a circle with coffee and donuts, and the conversation turned to struggles and doubts and questions. A woman named Sarah shared about her own journey with family addiction. I spent years trying to fix my brother, she said, and it nearly destroyed me. I had to learn that loving someone doesn't mean enabling them. It means setting boundaries and trusting God with the outcome. A man named Marcus talked about setting boundaries with an abusive parent. Honoring your father and mother doesn't mean letting them harm you, he said quietly. It means treating them with respect while also protecting yourself. Another person admitted they were still figuring out what forgiveness even meant. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending I wasn't hurt. Now I'm learning it means choosing not to let bitterness poison me while still acknowledging the harm that was done. I listened, feeling something loosen in my chest. No one here was pretending to have it all together. No one was demanding we protect the church's image above our own healing. This is what the body of Christ looks like when it's honest, I thought. Messy, imperfect, but real. When the group leader asked if anyone else wanted to share, I found myself speaking before I could second-guess it. I'm Daniel, I said, and I'm learning that sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it costs you everything you thought was safe. I told them about my mother, about the bottles and the letters and the confrontation, about Pastor Mitchell's pressure to stay silent, about the choice to pursue healing over reputation. I don't know how it's all going to turn out, I admitted. My mom's in treatment now, and we're taking it one day at a time. But I know this, God didn't call us to live in hiding. He called us to walk in the light, even when it's painful, even when it's costly. Around the circle, people nodded. Some wiped their eyes, and when I finished, Tom reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Thanks for sharing that, man. That took courage. As I drove home that afternoon, I thought about how far I'd come from that Sunday morning just months ago, sitting in the third row with my polite smile and my buried doubts. I wasn't the same person anymore. The journey had changed, me broken, me open, really. But in that breaking, something truer had emerged. I still had questions. I still wrestled with doubt sometimes. But I was learning to bring those questions to God, instead of hiding them behind a mask of certainty. And somehow, in that vulnerability, I was finding him closer than I'd ever imagined. The Lord really is close to the brokenhearted. I knew that now, not just as a verse I'd memorized, but as a truth I'd lived.